Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love these watches, everything is for sale. Reach out to me. I am still Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com. We buy what we sell what we buy. So if you're looking to sell rather than purchase, we pay cash, we pay fast, we wire direct, we walk you through the process, and we make it a no-brainer. No upper limit on value paid. We will buy your entire collection outright. And if you wish to trade one into several or several into one, we can do that as well. To buy, trade, or sell, reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com. Let's jump straight to a watch that came out in 2020, and I think this became the definitive Speedmaster. No, it's not the Speedmaster Professional Moonwatch, but I think this is first in the hearts of Omega Speedmaster fans today. Simply known as the Speedmaster Calibre 321, everyone calls it the Ed White. It's designed to evoke the reference 105003 that American astronaut Ed White, Gemini 4, wore in his spacewalk, America's first, in 1965. And with only a few upgrades like the clasp, the bracelet, the bezel insert, and the sapphire, this really feels like a true reissue of the original watch. This is as close as you can get to having the original. Now, it is 39.7 millimeters in diameter. And you can see this is no Moonwatch case. Squared off lugs, no lyre-style lug profile, a sharp break between satin flanks and polished tops, no guard or shear profile to protect the crown and the pushers. This is old school. It's also fairly narrow across the wrist, so you can see being under 48 millimeters from lug to lug, this really does wear nicely on my wrist. Super comfortable and well inboard of the edges. I could recommend this for a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference, and a big part of that is the vintage style flat link bracelet that has pivoted rather than solid end links. Taking a quick look at the dial, we'll do a loom shot just so you can get a sense of it. It is well loomed, and I applaud them for not diving too deep into photina on the dial. We do get a sapphire crystal that is dramatically cambered to look like a vintage plexi, and we get a tachymeter insert that is true to history, but also made of ceramic, so a lot more durable. Vintage Omega logo and marquee on the dial. We have the logo again on the crown, and we have that vintage logo on the clasp. Though you can see the clasp being relatively thick gauge steel on a single swing arm really does work and feel like a modern clasp. Trigger release. We've got two pairs of divots here, so if you're in between sizes with the removable links, you can move the anchoring point of the bracelet in and out, though you do have many removable links, so you should get the fit right. On the back, Lemania based, but not based on the Lemania 1873 cam chrono. This is based on the 2310, a movement originally designed collaboratively between Lemania and Omega in the early 40s. It became the Omega 321, and while never fitted to one of these so-called moon watches, all of the pre-moons that actually went to the moon, ironically, did include the 321. So not only a spacewalked movement, but a moon-flown movement. And you can see here it's beautiful. These are built in a special atelier at Omega, where one watchmaker completes the assembly of the movement and the timepiece. So in an era when basically every Omega watch is built in an automated fashion, this one goes slow with special dedicated watchmakers in a special room. Now it is a column wheel lateral clutch, doing away with the cam system of the 3861 and the 1861 before that. It's got a 55-hour power reserve, manually wound. It's got a stately old 18,000 vibration per hour beat rate and a blued overcoil hairspring that you might just be able to see there. You've also got this little rod that sticks out from the regulator. That's called a hairspring hooking guard, and it's designed to protect against the overcoil getting hung up on the polished index of the regulator, so that's what's going on there. We have snailing, satination, beveling, and black polishing of the screws. It is a very good looking and surprisingly colorful movement. The column wheel action is world class. It's everything you imagine. A very different kind of Omega sports watch now coming online. This is the 2015 revision of the 2009 resurrection of the Ploprof. The original Ploprof, or Plongeur Professionnel, came out in 1971. It was the Seamaster 600 professional diver, originally designed with Comex in mind, though never actually used by them. The original Ploprof is almost dainty compared to the modern watch, but new for 2015, it gained titanium construction, a ceramic bezel insert, a no-date dial, and a master chronograph chronometer movement with the display case back, so you really celebrate how wearable this is. Don't be fooled by the 55mm measurement. It's that way down the wrist, the long way. Actually, lug to lug, it's 48 and quite wearable. Now, it's also 18.5 thick, so don't think it's thin. It's not, but it sits on a small wrist just fine. This is the way to get it on the mesh bracelet, which they call shark-proof, and I suppose it could be, but the rest of your body is not. At least your wrist will still be intact. But you can see how it wears long down the wrist, but it doesn't actually encroach on the edge of the wrist. So this is a watch you can wear every day. You need to have maybe a little bit of a gonzo personality and a hot rodder's sensibility to do it, but it would work. It has a flush helium escape valve, something the original from the 70s did not have. And I'm also wondering, if a helium escape valve can be this unobtrusive on the Ploprof, why can't it be used in this form on the Diver 300 meter or the Planet Ocean? Now, we've got a system, just like we did on the original, where you press the plunger on the plongeur, and you can move the bezel in either direction. So it's still a dive bezel, because when you release the plunger, you can't move it. It's not mobile. Do a quick lights out, and you'll appreciate that the entire bezel is loomed. The seconds hand also lets you know, even during the dive, that your watch is running, but the minute hand and the bezel index are both green, so you can easily read them against each other. And then you have the unique crown system, where as you screw the crown out, it has two telescoping columns along the side, and it actually extends while continuing to protect all the way around. Now, there is a system that allows you to set the hour hand independently as you travel, which is very handy, but there's also hacking. This movement is effectively amagnetic, hugely shock resistant, water resistant down to 1,200 meters, with a coaxial escapement, a Matas chronometer certification, and 60 hours of power reserve. All this, including the bracelet, grade 5 titanium, so very light but also scratch resistant and hypoallergenic, a spectacular clasp. You can see how you've got a slider with many individual stops along the way, but then you've also got a traditional all-or-nothing fold-out dive extension. So you see how you can fold this out along with the slider. Now you've got almost 50 millimeters or 2 inches of total extensible length. But let's say you want to go upscale with your sports watch and maybe scale down in size. Well, launched in 2010, the two-tone Nautilus chronograph is what you're after. Now, the two-tone with a rather saturated blue dial, much more colorful than a traditional Nautilus slate blue. This came out in 2010 with the two-tone rose and steel, about 4 model years after the 2006 debut of the original Nautilus chronograph. So dimensionally, they're identical. 40.5 millimeters. This is only 12.5 millimeters thick. You still got a flyback chronograph, reset and restart without first stopping. You've still got the overlapping coaxial bullseye where you have chrono minutes and chrono hours on a single axis. 120 meters water resistant, well loomed, automatic winding with a 55-hour power reserve. The complexity of the case assembly and the detail of the finish accounts for a big part of the premium of a Nautilus over an Aquanaut. It's simply a much more involved process to make, finish, and assemble one of these. You can even see that the bracelet is more finely detailed and thoughtfully nuanced than the rather crude and blockish bracelet included with the Aquanauts. On the back, you can see we've got a Calibre 28520 unidirectional automatic winding column wheel, vertical clutch, 55-hour reserve, anti-magnetic silicone hairspring. It's got a Gyromax-style free-sprung balance, adjusted in 6 positions, and the combination of all of these features means the watch is accurate to no worse than -3 plus 2 seconds per day per Patek Philippe. You can also see that the finishing quality is self-evident, and if you missed it earlier, this is a flyback chronograph, so you reset and restart, you do not have to stop first. That's great for timing events that occur in super rapid succession, where you may not have time to stop, reset, and restart. It's an easy watch to wear. If you can wear a 40mm Daytona on the bracelet, you can wear this. It's flatter than you think, and it's also shorter across the wrist, and I appreciate all of those qualities. Now we're sticking with our sports watch theme, and this one's also 120 meters water resistant and two-tone, but very distinct in design. Here you can see the H. Moser & C Pioneer Tourbillon Blue Lagoon. We've got a Blue Lagoon dial with a super subtle clear lacquered Moser logo, a flying 1-minute tourbillon, 120 meter water resistance, then we've got a juxtaposition of rose gold with blackened titanium. So that's what you're looking at all the way around. The movement, HMC 804, is bidirectional winding, 3 days of power reserve, 3 Hz beat rate. You can see because it is a flying tourbillon and there's no upper bridge to block your view, it needs better bracing on the bottom. And so that's done with a super wide ball bearing. And notice those milky gray balls, those are actually ceramic, hybrid ceramic ball bearing for low friction. A little nod to Moser pocket watch making in the 19th century and early 20th century. This golden chaton cup holding the barrel arbor fixed by screws, all screw heads black polished. You can see double-crested Côte de Genève on the bridges. And then we have snailing, media blast, and beveling on the rose gold rotor. All this with screw-down crown, 120 meters water resistant, a flexible rubber factory strap, and then the dial, you can see the tourbillon features 2 hairsprings. It's a free-sprung, shock-resistant arrangement. The finishing on the tourbillon carriage is the best quality of finishing you'll find on any part of the movement, so they give you the goods up front. What you might not notice is that these 2 hairsprings, which are made in-house by Moser, they are identical, 180 degrees out of phase and fixed in position. So when gravity causes one to speed up the watch, the other, by an equal and opposite margin, will slow down the watch. This system restores the chronometric intent of the tourbillon, which Abraham Louis Breguet originally envisioned for his pocket watch tourbillon regulators, only this one, because of the hairspring arrangement, works in a wristwatch format. And Moser, not taking the easy way out, through its precision engineering in-house subsidiary, Moser makes the balance, the hairspring, and the escapement super difficult to accomplish. And those are parts that even many accomplished movement manufacturers like Zenith, for example, and JLC don't actually make themselves. And then, of course, it doesn't say Swiss made because Swiss made means that a minimum of 60% of the watch is Swiss value, whereas at Moser, it's 90 to 95, so they don't use the inferior labeling. And their design language is so strong, you know this is a Moser watch. You don't have to see that ghosted logo. Throwing it on the wrist, it's big, though not huge. It's about 50.9 millimeters lug to lug, and it's 42.8 millimeters in diameter. I could wear this and wear this just fine. So if your wrist is my size or larger, game on. Okay, calendar watches. I think we'll start with calendar watches once we're done with the wackiest watch. Calendar watches are coming, guys, don't worry. But this is the weirdest watch I have to show to you. And I'm not lying when I say that this thing right here is the easiest near 49 millimeter watch to wear in the world. And that's because the HYT H10 has no lugs. So it's 48.8 millimeters in diameter, but it's also 48.8 from lug tip to lug tip. Now, it's not thin, it's 19.6 millimeters thick, but it is very wearable. The strap is proprietary, fully integrated, and fixed to the case with screws, so it's going nowhere. The difference between the H0 and the H10, well, there's a couple. First, the dial is distinct, opening up more of the movement to view. Second, we have this striated track that runs around the edge. You can see that there are numerals cut into it. This is almost like someone took a icing comb to a wedding cake. And then we have a more progressively rounded sapphire crystal instead of the very cylindrical up and down vertical profile of the original H0. Plus, we now have a screw down crown that endows the watch with 50 meters of water resistance and surface swimmability versus 30 meters and no swimming on the original H0. So a lot of changes. We've got a great clasp here. It's a titanium clasp. The watch is mostly sapphire. As you can see, it's about one-third steel and two-thirds sapphire. So while it does accumulate scratches, and that can happen, for the most part, it's shielded by its sapphire. Let's do a loom shot before we go into the clasp, because this watch has one of the craziest loom shots I've ever seen. Notice it is a regulator. You see the little meniscus between the two fluids? One is clear, one is blue, and they're immiscible. So the movement of the meniscus actually indicates the current hour. And you can see how fast the fluid track actually moves. Since I have separate hours, minutes, and seconds on the dial, this watch is actually a regulator. Now, that you could see and you could deduce just by looking at it. What you might not know is that it is also a regulator that is a retrograde. When the fluid reaches the bottom, you can see how it can't loop through the gap at the bottom. I'll turn the lights back on now so you can really see this. But it can't jump from one side of the borosilicate tube to the other. So when it reaches 6 o'clock, it retrogrades all the way back to the other side. This is 6 and this is 6, but this is 5 and this is 7. So that is how it tells time. And you can see that it's visible in profile, though it's best viewed from over the top. There's a running seconds display over there, a little bit like a turbine. And then the 65-hour manual wind power reserve is visible right here, and you can see how it advances fairly quickly as I wind the movement. The movement was created for HYT by Chronode, which is an extraordinarily distinguished movement house run by Jean-Francois Moser. Now we have these two cam-operated bellows. Those are reservoirs. One holds the clear liquid, one holds the blue. Flip it all over, and you can see that the watch is basically a conventional mechanical watch. You've got a Swiss lever escapement. It beats away at 4 hertz, and then it drives off of a barrel. There is a train, and there is a cam system, which you can see right here. And this cam system pushes and pulls the bellows to drive the fluids. You can actually see that the beveling on the edge of the bridges is quite nice. They're skeletonized, the screw heads are polished, and there's a nice satin finish across all of the bridges. So this is a good looking and well-finished movement. And we'll get back to that clasp now. The case is steel and sapphire, but the clasp is titanium. It has a clever little micro adjust built into it. Otherwise, twin trigger release and snap shut, it stays shut. Combination of satin and polished accents and media blast. And when the watch is on the wrist, I love these HYTs. Considering you can get them now for like $10,000 to $15,000 compared to the original retail price over 40 grand, these are a great buy. And the company that makes them is still very much in business with a sister company, Pressiflex, that's able to provide parts and service. Even if HYT, for example, during its bankruptcy, was not able to, we could still service these watches through Pressiflex, which makes its money basically building medical devices. So this is a fantastic modern clepsydra. Okay, now, calendar watches. Bum, 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 bum. Here is a spectacular calendar watch from IWC, the Portugieser Perpetual Calendar 42, 42.4 millimeters in steel. This model was launched back in 2020, a more wearable IWC Portuguese perpetual calendar, as they tend to be over 44 millimeters. Now you can see how it works just like every other IWC Kurt Klaus perpetual calendar system. Using the quick set in the crown, you adjust all the indications, and it's as simple, even for the moon phase, as setting the correct date for the month you're in. Now, the watch is a classical Portugieser, as we have leaf hands, Arabic numerals, a railroad track outboard. A little bit different in that you can see this one is a rare center seconds Portuguese. We'll get all this fired up. It uses a caliber 82650, which is a Peloton automatic pawl-based winding system on the back. We'll take a look at that. You can see it has a rose gold medallion in the rotor. You can see the full ceramic Peloton pawl-based system, or at least you would be able to see it if we had focus. The balance beaten away at 4 hertz, 60-hour power reserve, 5-position chronometer style adjustment, and just so much more wearable than a conventional Portugieser Perpetual. A really easy watch to wear even on my wrist. This makes the Portugieser Perpetual calendar viable for people who have normal-sized human forearms. All right, so I didn't know if I should do this, but I'm going to show you a watch I designed. I designed this with Armand Billard of Sartory Billard, and you can see this is the SB04 Team Mosso. It is a watch that I created from my Talking Time with Team Mosso Facebook group, and 25 will be made, and the idea is that it's for the group. But I wanted to work through a constructor who is also a personal friend, and I get no proceeds from the sale of these. As I did with my Dan Reuter chronograph, 100% of the rewards go to the creator. And I wanted something that used purple and rose gold with a difference between the dial center texture and the hour track texture. So I wanted satin for the hours, granular center, crosshairs. I wanted a grill in rose gold that sits proud of the dial with breguet Arabic numerals and sectors, and then skeletonized alpha-style hands. This is not a calendar watch, and I realize I'm breaking my vow to end on calendar watches, but I thought you guys might find this fun. DM Projects does the case. Armand makes the hands manually as well as the grill. The dial base is by Kari Voutilainen's Comblamin Cadran. And then you can see that the case is pretty sophisticated with a domed bezel with gadroons, polish, satination, media blast recesses, and then a movement by La Joux-Perret with a custom rotor. And you can see this is a piece that is effectively unique, as the other ones will be numbered 1 through 25. This one is the prototype of the line. It uses a La Joux-Perret GG100 automatic, which is a 68-hour automatic that uses a serrated gold-toned rotor. And the watch is 40 millimeters by 11.2 by 45.1 millimeters lug-to-lug in steel. I absolutely love the way this came out. Another difference between this and the production models is that the production models will have stitching in the strap to match the rose gold, so it'll be purple and rose gold. We also have British Racing Green, brown, Cartier red, which I call racing red, and a slate gray with the same dial design and textures and grill. A really cool piece. Armand, you did an awesome job with this. French-made watches from an artisan who is self-taught, the best of the best. Okay, now, speaking of the best of the best, these are two watches I cannot get over. I am obsessed with them. Here we have the Patek Philippe 5235G and the Patek Philippe 5236P. This was my dream Patek Philippe, but I have trouble reading it. This is my dream Patek Philippe, easier to read, and a perpetual calendar rather than an annual, in platinum rather than white gold. This is the first time I've had these two watches, which are clearly related but also worlds apart, in the same frame. So let's take a look at the 5235G. This came out in 2011, and Terry Stern has called this one of his favorite designs that he's coined yet, and I have to agree with that. This is one of his best. First of all, the case. Just like the vintage 3448 or the 3450, cylindrical case, conical bezel, angular, sharp, stepped, thrusting lugs, perfectly executed. A unique pin buckle with a vintage Patek Philippe marquee. This is the only Patek series that gets this buckle. Rolling around the dial, annual calendar, aperture style, regulator dial with hours, minutes, and seconds. Hacking? Oh yeah, you better believe it's hacking. The aperture style calendar featuring silver white discs printed in blue, and everything printed on the dial is printed in blue. We have sunken sub-registers for the seconds and the hours with a different tone texture, and then underneath that minute hand, we will move the minute hand here, the Patek Philippe logo and city of origin has been engraved. It's an annual calendar, Patek's original invention from 1996. They created the first annual, and it's a day, date, and month, easy to read. You'll also appreciate that there are several different tones of silver here with a stainless steel-like brush texture from top to bottom. On the back, 22-karat mass, and what really stands out, this Calibre 31260, not the 240 micro rotor. This was specially designed for a new generation of automatic watches, and this was the debut platform back in 2011. You have the Spiromax, silicone hairspring, and then the full silicone escapement. You can see the lever and the escape wheel, both in silicone, unlubricated. So this watch employing all of the advanced research series technologies except the hybrid metal and silicone Gyromax SI balance. 48 hours of power reserve, beautiful architecture with this crescent from the barrel down to the escapement. The bevels are broad and beautiful. We have several different sizes of engine turned perlage on the base plate, an extraordinarily wide Côte de Genève, 40.5 millimeters in diameter, and we'll throw it on my wrist. This, I would still love to own this watch, but in a world where the 5236P exists, I don't think this is still my Grail Patek, because the 5236P exists. Now this is a little bit bigger, 41.3 millimeters. This came out in 2021. It's in platinum. So while we have the same case design, you can see it doesn't feature satination and profile. The whole thing is polished. Also, because it is a much more expensive watch, we get a full deployant clasp. The dial is just plain easier to read, as we now get a set of hands mounted at center and a perpetual calendar rather than an annual calendar. So you have an American style inline calendar. So the day, double-digit date, and month. We have 4 discs that are coplanar and 2 pairs of coaxial discs. 3 patents were filed on this calendar system, and you can see the dial preserves a lot of what was so great about the 5235, as we have a vertical metallic grain. It's not as obvious here because of the darkness and the color, but it does fall like a curtain from top to bottom. We also have a moon phase, which is not present on the annual calendar regulator, and a gradient, so it fades from light at the center to dark at the edge. On the back, we have some changes. Changes are mostly out of sight to the module. This movement's 33 millimeters in diameter because of the module. This one's 34, but again, the module's on the dial side, so the movement looks the same from the case back. You can see that the bridges are dramatically different, as Patek went with a sort of classical finger bridge or finger train type arrangement, rather than the more mono bridge approach of the annual calendar. Another big change here is that the Advanced Research Series escapement is gone. And I believe that's a reliability change, as Patek didn't get the performance it wanted out of the silicon system. It's still experimenting with that. But we do get 20% more energy and torque from the mainspring barrel to drive the more power-intensive Perpetual calendar, even though both of these have the same power reserve of 48 hours. Now, a big change comes in the form of the micro rotor. It might look like white gold, but it's actually platinum. The idea being to create more polar moment or turning force to more vigorously wind this power-intensive Perpetual calendar. And it is bigger. It's about 48.5 millimeters lug to lug and a little bit over 11 millimeters thick. It is a fearsomely complex thing. The movement has 503 parts. This is my dream Patek Philippe. And this would be my exit watch from the watch space. By the way, guys, if you're interested in this guy, link in the description to the landing page on Sartory Billard, where you can actually order one of the different variants, including this core model in purple. But again, if cost is no object, bum, 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 bum. For any of the watches that are not the one I designed, reach out to tmosso@thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.